Hi, I'm Frank Ryan. Shortly after I was elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, I started a program called the Financial Rescue Plan and a Financial Rescue Caucus. And it became very obvious to me that as I was looking around the Commonwealth, that many people believe that the Commonwealth's obligations would be paid always and that the Commonwealth was just too big to fail. But the economic crisis and bankruptcy plaguing Puerto Rico will soon come to other states. The state of Illinois is perhaps the most likely candidate that may have to seek protection from creditors, with Connecticut, New Jersey, California, and potentially Pennsylvania is not far behind. I've spent my entire career helping organizations avoid bankruptcy. As a certified public accountant, I've noticed a set of events that organizations go through leading up to insolvency and potentially bankruptcy. Municipalities and states go through the exact same type of events. The longer an organization, the longer the Commonwealth waits to address our fundamental financial problems, the less likely financial survival will be. The Independent Fiscal Office recently prepared an economic and budget outlook for the Commonwealth through the year 2017 through 2023, and the outlook's not good. But we have time to fix it. In the case of Puerto Rico, the events leading to its problems were occurring a decade before with little to no wherewithal to solve the problem. What's different, though, with the state bankruptcy, in this case, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, is that federal approval and legislation is required to allow it to occur. Thus far in the United States, only Puerto Rico has been able to file for protection. States, generally speaking, are not able to file bankruptcy without federal approval and legislation. And that's wherein lies the misunderstanding. In the case of Puerto Rico, PROMESA provided for the establishment of an oversight board appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate with oversight by the courts. An interesting op-ed article by a citizen of Puerto Rico, the underlying reorganization became painfully apparent. First, elected officials in Puerto Rico were no longer effectively in control of their own destiny, nor were the citizens. So what happens, and what I think you need to be aware of, is if the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania doesn't begin to address our financial problems and financial ill, as has been put out by the Independent Fiscal Office, we're going to run the same fate as what happened in Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico will serve as an example of what we have to be careful about. As an example, in the case of Puerto Rico, over 180 public schools have closed. And this board that was put into effect by the United States Senate and signed into effect by the president has threatened to make further cuts in public sector pay and benefits. Unfortunately, that's the life under reorganization. You know, Puerto Rico was unfortunately hit by just a terrible hurricane, but its problems existed well before that. The hurricane, as horrible as it may have been, may provide the opportunity for Puerto Rico to rebuild. We will not be so fortunate in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You see, states have sovereign immunity, and we cannot, generally speaking, file bankruptcy. We, however, can become insolvent. What that insolvency means is the federal government can step in as a lender of last resort and then appoint an administrator over the state's finances. Since the state has never yet filed bankruptcy, the case law does not exist, but PROMESA provides an oversight protection and a clue as to how an insolvency would be dealt with. What's an insolvency look like? First, insolvency is a condition in which the financial options are extremely limited. If this budget that we saw in 2017 was not an indicator, it should provide you with some understanding of what this would look like in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. People will become more and more unwilling to accept the financial alternatives that we've looked at. As an example, there was an entire group of us that did not believe in raising taxes. There's another group, of which I'm part of it, that want to cut spending. There are other people that wanted to just raise taxes. But what happens is there becomes this inability of the financial capacity of the state to be met, meaning we don't have the money to pay our bills. Once cash becomes impaired, governments will typically be faced with layoffs and cuts first to non-essential services and then to essential services. You may have seen that in your own community. Let me give you an example. You may have had a layoff of police officers. Attempts to increase taxes will increase funds available, and that only work in a limited period. In the Independent Fiscal Office report, one of the things that was interesting to note, that senior citizens are moving into the Commonwealth at a rapid rate. but younger people are leaving. So the people who are paying the taxes in the Commonwealth are leaving, and that's going to hurt us in the long run, but we have time. Those unable to move will become less competitive if they're not able to pass on the cost to the consumer. Concurrently, the state will find that fewer companies will want to relocate to the state until the financial outlook is more certain. The longer we wait in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to solve our financial problems, the greater the likelihood of a downward spiral or bankruptcy will occur. This is where decisive action must be taken or fiscal rescue becomes impossible. For a state to declare bankruptcy, a bill similar to PROMESA will have to be passed in order for the financial reorganization to begin. Unfortunately, most states in financial trouble are usually under a misguided opinion that they can tax their way out of the problem. Since we live in a world where people and companies are free to move, that assumption is fatal. Due to the free movement of people, as we are seeing with younger people in the Commonwealth, we may find ourselves in a financial capacity that we are no longer competitive in the United States or in the world. Only the most vulnerable have no options. In a financial spiral, populations of workers and taxpayers start to move further, negatively impacting tax revenue and putting the state in a death spiral. The longer it takes us in the Commonwealth to realize the crisis, the more severe the results will be. Creditors in bankruptcy, particularly bondholders, will be paid very little. Even the public sector workers, however, will be negatively impacted. And I need to emphasize that, because all too often workers are told that they will see that their pensions are guaranteed. They may be, as long as there are financial assets to pay it. Eventually what will happen is taxes will be increased on property to a point where even homeowners can't keep their homes, further putting the state into a death spiral. Property owners will be negatively affected, since the Oversight Board could increase property taxes substantially. In such a way, it could be high enough to render the property worthless. If such an irresponsible action were to be taken to increase property taxes with little regard to the ability of the people to pay, the probability of the future survival of the state will be severely impacted. Finally, let me just say this. In decades of doing financial restructuring, the worst thing a debtor can do is to delay facing the crisis head on. We have the opportunity in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to take this independent fiscal office report, utilize the results that they've pronounced, look at the crisis and deal with it head on. We need to recognize that we need to curb spending. We need to make government efficient. And that's precisely what I'm doing with some of the programs and bills that we have to put into effect. Our first bill, which was the Auditor General Accountability, which required that any Auditor General options and actions that were determined as a result of their audits would have to be responded to within 120 days. That's been signed into law by the governor under the fiscal code this past year. We're in the process now of instituting the second Auditor General bill, which is on the training and education to include such things as forensic audits, fraud audits, as well as a typical operational audit. That will help the Auditor General have more tools to help us have our state run more efficiently. And the next step that we're doing as part of our financial rescue plan is to consider a case of helping the state requiring agencies to go lean. What's that mean? It means taking a look at our operations and remove the unnecessary bureaucracy. If we deal with our crisis head on in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we can avoid the concerns that I've been so apprehensive about, as you've seen happen in Puerto Rico, as is currently happening in the states of Illinois, California, and other states. We need to make sure that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania recognizes that we only have 2 to 4 years before the financial options available to us deteriorate so much that we have no other option but to seek protection from creditors. That's not what we need to do. If we deal with the problem head on, we can win this. Let's get the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and remain the keystone to the entire United States and get our fiscal house in order. Thanks so much for your time today. I'm Frank Ryan, the 101st Legislative District.